Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Michael Barron here. We're out in my little culinary garden. It's where I grow a lot of the herbs and various vegetables and things that we use in the show. Just some LED fixtures for some light that I can raise and lower depending on what I'm growing. And depending on the time of the year, we have lots of different things growing out here. Lots of greens and kale and chard and things. And lots of herbs. You know, I have all the basics you need for cooking. You know, all the different lemon thyme and parsley and oregano and tarragon and everything. And you know, save a lot of money doing it this way because those little plastic clamshells you buy in the store, those are like, you know, $8 or something I've seen before for like a little clamshell full of basil. So you save a lot of money doing it this way. It's really not that difficult. So whenever I've got this much basil, I usually end up making pesto because it uses up a lot of basil all at once. So we're gonna snip these off and grind them up and make this beautiful sauce that you can put on almost anything. If you look at this basil here, you can see it's starting to flower here a little bit, and some pesto experts will say the best time to make pesto out of your basil is when it's just about to flower. They get kind of resinous and extra aromatic. And so this is the time to make some pesto. I'm gonna harvest some of this basil, and I'm not gonna pull off individual leaves. I'm actually gonna slice the whole plant, and that's so it grows back. But basil actually will, where you slice it, it'll split and grow 2 more stalks at the point where you chopped it off. If you just pull off the leaves, it just kind of eventually gets dies off, and that's not very helpful. So on this particular plant right here, I'm gonna come down to below one of these leaf nodes and snip the whole thing off right here and get this whole big cluster. And these leaves right here where I snipped off will branch out in opposite directions and create more foliage where I clipped that off. So endless basil. So I'm gonna keep doing that. I'm gonna keep snipping these off. I'm gonna take all the tops off these plants, and I'll have a big bowl full of basil to make our pesto. Basil-y. So I got a whole big bowl of basil. It's quite a bit here, a whole salad bowl full, and this is going to be the perfect base for our pesto. So let's go inside. I'll show you exactly how to make it. Let's go! It's time to make pesto. Pesto is really easy. I've got a whole bunch of basil here, and the first step is just to take the leaves off. I'm going to yank all these leaves off and throw them in the bowl here. Don't worry too much about having stems and things in there. As long as it's the smaller stems, it doesn't matter that much, but I'm just going to try to get the majority of the stems out of the basil here. Pull off most of the leaves and throw them in the bowl. Basil-y. These are pine nuts. They're really delicious and one of the main ingredients in pesto. You can also use walnuts if you prefer those, but I like to toast them. There's kind of 2 schools of thought on the pine nuts. Some people like to say the best way is to use them raw. Some people, like me, I prefer to toast them. I think it brings out a little bit of extra flavor and nuance. And to toast them is really easy. I'm just gonna dump them in a dry pan on a medium heat or so. And this is not the time to walk away. These will go from toasted to burnt like that. So keep a close eye on them, give them a good toss, and just stand around until they smell fragrant and you know, start taking on a little bit of color. So see all these toastiness here? I'm not too worried about getting color on every single piece. I don't want to take them too far, but there's a huge difference. If you were here with me, you could really smell the difference between the toasted and the raw. These are super fragrant now, and the whole room smells like pine nuts. And since smell is a big part of your taste, I think that adds a lot of depth to the dish. I'm gonna pour them out of the pan just so they stop cooking and we don't get them over browned. Let them just cool off. So we've got our nice toasted pine nuts. These are cooling off. They smell pretty fragrant. I'm gonna set those to the side. And the next step we have to do prep-wise is grate up some Parmesan cheese. I've got some Parmigiano Reggiano. And the best way to measure cheese, if you're gonna grate it, is with a scale. So I'm gonna use about 3 ounces for this recipe. So I'm gonna try to do my best to eyeball a 3-ounce block. 1.25, that's not quite there, a little more. And now for something a little greater. We're gonna grate up this cheese on the smaller holes, not the big holes, but the small holes. And I'm gonna grate up this Parmesan. Cheese. Try to avoid grating our fingerprints off. We have our Parmesan grated, And one of the few ingredients remaining is some garlic. I've got 2 garlic cloves here. I'm just gonna give them a rough chop. So when they go in the food processor, they have a better chance of getting ground small. If you want to be super traditional, this is a mortar and pestle. This is the most legit way to make real pesto, but this takes way longer, and in my opinion, the results are a little less emulsified, and without practice, you're gonna have better results with the food processor, I think, and it's way, way quicker. So let's show you that today, and I'm gonna put this thing away. It's heavy. You ready?
Ready.
All right, it's time to put together our pesto. We got all our ingredients. We got our picked basil, we have the cheese, we have the olive oil, about 3/4 of a cup here. We have the pine nuts, 2 cloves of garlic. All this is gonna go in the food processor and until it's nice and smooth and spreadable, the classic pesto texture. So I'm gonna start with the garlic. It's gonna go into the processor. I'm gonna try to give that a few blitzes on its own here. Little head start. We'll add the pine nuts. I just want to pulse this until I get a coarse, kind of homogeneous mixture here. I'm going to use a rubber spatula to scrape down the edges and make sure all that garlic gets fully incorporated. I'm gonna give it a few more pulses and get it nice and smooth before we add the rest of the ingredients. That's looking pretty good, almost like a pine nut peanut butter at this point. In goes the cheese. And we'll pulse it again. I'm gonna scrape down the edges one more time before the basil goes in, just to make sure we get a nice base started for our pesto. All right, we've got a nice homogeneous mixture here. It's time to add the basil. It's not all gonna fit in one batch. I'm probably gonna do maybe 3 batches or so. I'm just gonna take a few handfuls of basil and shove them down into the processor and blend it until it's like a paste. It's very satisfying. So we've got a pretty nice paste going here. But this is pretty thick. We're gonna need to add the olive oil, which helps turn this into an actual sauce. We're gonna season as well. I'm gonna add a teaspoon or so of kosher salt, a teaspoon. If you have a typical food processor, a lot of people don't know this, but if this little doohickey that comes out here, so you can pour straight down into this hole, but this actual piece has a little tiny pinhole right in the bottom, and that's actually for the purpose of drizzling in oil to make an emulsion, which is exactly what we're gonna do. So we're gonna use this part for its intended purpose. I'm gonna drop it into place, and I can just dump the oil into this, this reservoir here, and then the oil will drop from that little pinhole in a nice even stream into the pesto. So I have 3/4 of a cup of olive oil here. I'm just gonna dump this into the space here. As the machine runs, I'm just gonna let it run and let that oil incorporate. So turn it on here. You see that little hole in the bottom? That's where the oil is falling out and being incorporated into the pesto. So I don't have to worry about how fast I pour it in. And all of our oil has been incorporated. I'm gonna give it one last scrape down with the spatula and make sure there's no hidden chunks of garlic or anything hiding in the corners, and give it one last blitz. Man, that really, it smells like basil. It's very potent stuff. It's delicious though. A little scrape. Let's give it one last blitz. All right, so let's dump our pesto out. I'm gonna take out the blade. That's what I'm talking about. Look at that stuff. I can't think of a better use for a whole bunch of basil other than a whole bunch of pesto. Look how creamy that is, how green and vibrant. It's really fresh. It smells like fresh herbs. It smells like summer. It's really good stuff. I'm gonna taste this now and adjust it for seasoning. I wanna see if it needs any salt or anything else. It's really rich. You can taste the The Parmesan, the olive oil really add a lot of body to it. And the pine nuts that like toasting. Man, I think it needs a little bit of salt. I'm just gonna add a little bit. And I think our pesto is ready to go. You can put this on like literally anything. You can put this on, I mean, pasta is the most popular, of course, pesto pasta. But just mix it with other condiments too. Mix it with some mayonnaise. Pesto mayonnaise on a piece of bread or a sandwich is a game changer. Pour it on some tomatoes. And we'll do a little demo here. We're gonna make a little caprese salad, really basic, with some pesto, some fresh mozzarella to show you what that looks like. But I think we're gonna be using this all throughout the week to make all kinds of stuff, because now we got a ton of pesto. We're gonna make a little caprese salad, a classic. I've got some fresh mozzarella and tomato and our delicious pesto. And we'll just kind of give you an example of how you could use some in a dish like this. I'm just gonna slice this head of mozzarella here into a few slices. Maybe a 1/4 inch thick. And there's lots of ways to make caprese salad. The most classical is just olive oil, salt, and pepper with your tomato and your mozzarella, but we're gonna go with pesto today, switch it up a little bit. It works really well. We got a nice tomato here. Got a few yellow cherry tomatoes from my garden. We're gonna add those too. I'm just gonna split these in half. A little bit of color, a little bit of sweetness. All right, let's build this dish. This couldn't be any easier, really. I'm just gonna lay some tomato down on the plate and alternate with a little bit of mozzarella. This is not exactly the most modern presentation here, but this is just for demonstration purposes. You've got a little bit of mozzarella, a little bit of tomato. I'm gonna throw a few of these nice little gold tomatoes in here for a little pop of sourness and sweetness. We're gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper, a little fresh cracked pepper along the top. Got some flaky sea salt. This is gonna want a good bit of salt. The pesto is already salted, but you still need to season the tomatoes and the mozzarella on their own. So we've got some nice salt there. We'll add our pesto right over the top. This stuff is so bright and like summery, it's just like fresh. I'm gonna garnish with a little bit of fresh basil. Flowering basil. I'm just gonna finish it with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil just to tie the whole thing together. Just a little squeeze bottle. I like these squeeze bottles quite a bit. They make everything really convenient. And there it is. It's beautiful, isn't it? Look at that thing. Tomatoes, this beautiful pesto that came together. That pesto came together in literally like, I mean, I don't know, a minute and a half. We put all the things in the food processor. The most difficult thing is like grating the cheese. I mean, this is this super simple recipe. Like any non-chef can make this, you know? And it's summertime in a lot of parts of the country. The tomatoes are really good, so it's a really great time to go out to your local farmer's market and find those really nice heirloom tomatoes. Get some high quality mozzarella, make that pesto. And man, this is a great dish for like really any occasion. Pesto that is better than the resto. I am not a cake decorator. Check it out. Pesto that's ready. Goddamn pesto. Pesto that is better than the resto.